I think they're also, when it comes to emotional support animals in general, but also as separate from like service animals and then the animal assisted therapy, is this stigma against people who have emotional support animals. But from what you've told me, it sounds like that comes from a misconception, the misunderstanding of the difference between them and other service animals, in that they're just not the same thing. It's not the same program, and it's not the same treatment for the same need. For example, if someone needs a dog just to be able to walk around, if they have like a serious vision impairment or something, then that's an entirely different situation, an entirely different treatment than an animal that's there for emotional support, but each one is just as valid. I think there's this major misconception between the two, just in which people would say that emotional support animals aren't as valid, or people with them aren't as valid as people who have them for some kind of immediately apparent physiological need. Do you know what I'm talking about as far as the kind of the cultural stigma there?
Yeah, and I think going back to the research that shows all the benefits of just having a pet, when you
Right.
add in a person with a disability, those benefits help make them live a better life, basically. It allows them to, reduce their panic attacks because they're more calm at home. They may not have as much paranoia, and it kind of allows them to be back to baseline a little bit closer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer, it sounds like, to people with that misconception, kind of perpetuating that stigma, is just asking them, are you comforted, excuse me, by animals? Were you comforted by a pet when you were a kid? Because if so, this is that times 10 for these people who need treatment.
Yeah,
It's just not an issue I had thought through before. I find that fascinating.
and in my book, I talk about the different levels of care, because in therapy and medical practice, there are different levels of care. So you wouldn't send someone with a cold to surgery because that's not what they require.
Right,
And so I kind of view emotional support animals and service animals on different levels of care. So
right,
someone that is still disabled by their diagnoses, but maybe isn't as impaired as much, may benefit better from an emotional support animal. And then someone who may need more assistance, especially if they need assistance outside of the home, then a service animal would be better for them.
right. Absolutely. I think that's a great way of looking at it too, as far as different levels of treatment. Not that one is valid and that one is less valid, but that they're just very different treatments with very, like, for very people who have very different needs. And one is certainly more extreme than the other, but it's just a matter of what the patient or what the client is in need of. I think that's a great way of thinking about it. So in your book, is it like mostly awareness as far as working through problems like that, working through the concepts? Is it more on methodology? What do you really get down to in the book as far as like what is not necessarily the thesis, right? But what is the meat of it? What are you trying to explain to people and articulate, and what are you trying to share?
So, the biggest thing is helping people go through their journey of a service dog or emotional support animal. And so, I have chapters on talking with your therapist because that can be one of the hardest parts and one of the biggest barriers to receiving this type of care. I talk about the ethics of it, I talk about the laws. There's a lot of information on the internet that talk about scam sites and they just want your money. And so I really break down what the laws actually say so that they have something that they can reference themselves. I talk about training, about how to find an animal, and how to overcome some of the common problems that I hear about.
Common problems as in what? Not necessarily. You can give examples if you'd like, but common problems in what variety?
So, being stopped in public, dealing with family that may be unsupportive, things like that, things that hinder a person's ability to move about in the world with a service or emotional support animal.
Right. So it's it works people or walks people through the treatment, but then also provides them with help in those kinds of scenarios that might discourage them from even having or pursuing or keeping the treatment in the first place. You know, it tells them how this can be helpful, how to get through it, and then also how to contend with the fact that not everybody is going to be supportive. I think that's a great process as far as walking people through the treatment.
Yeah, and I'm on some Facebook groups, and so these were some of the common things that I saw people struggling with. And so I really wanted to not only give them a guide to how to get one, but also how to survive in the world
Right.
once you have one.
Right. That makes sense. I think as far as educating people on what the laws are, and how to actually go through this process specifically is very important. As you said, the phishing sites online and things like that, where you're just trying to get the help that you need, or at least that you think you need or have been told that you need. Maybe even by some other, online source, but you're just trying to get the help that you need, and you're finding all this misinformation. I think that the fact that we live in, the era of information, we have so much that we don't know what to do with it, and so much of it that we don't know what to trust. And when you're looking for treatment, that can be really scary. Even if I think I'm having flu symptoms, so I Google my symptoms, and turns out I have leukemia or something. Not really, but that's what I think because I've Googled the symptoms, and now I'm freaking out because I've been misinformed. So I think the fact that you've compiled this information as a section of your book uh, is really cool and really important for people, that you've given them a verified source. You have your master's, you're a therapist. This is something that you care about, that you have worked on and are working on. I think that the authenticity of it all is not only admirable, but I think will be very helpful